And I think that a lot of times, that's what happened with entrepreneurs and business owners, that they put all their hopes in a product. And I think that is not the right approach. I think that what we need to put is on the impact. So if you think about the blockbusters, like the product was video cassette. The impact was entertainment. So if you focus on the impact, then you can pivot because you're not married to the product, because the product, to your point, becomes obsolete.
Hello, profiters, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders. I am so excited. Today we have a very special guest, and we're going to talk about a really important topic. I have Dr. Luis Velasquez joining us. And Dr. Velasquez is a Silicon Valley executive coach. He's also a Stanford University graduate school business school facilitator. And he specializes specifically in a topic of resilience. He works with leaders around the world and really guides them in terms of turning challenges into opportunities. His strategic thinking is regularly published by the Harvard Business Review and Fast Company, and he's been spotlighted in Dory Clark's The Long Game. I am so excited to welcome Dr. Velasquez to our platform. He's also the author of a best-selling book called Ordinary Resilience. You guys definitely make sure you grab a copy of this book. And today we're going to talk about resilience and building that as business leaders and building resilience in your business. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Velasquez to our platform. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. I will love if you refer me as Luis. Leave the doctor at the door, so that is okay with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Luis.
I'm doing well. I'm so grateful and honored and excited to be here with you. So I appreciate it.
Well, this is a really important topic. I've had lots of conversations with clients, with some of our audience members that have called in. And this is a topic that a lot of business leaders are struggling with now. We've gone through COVID, we've gone through the Great Resignation. I've had people say they feel like they should be the boss, but everybody else around them is the boss. And frankly, they're dealing with burnout, mental burnout. And a lot of them are considering selling businesses, closing shop, starting all over again. And you bring out an interesting concept of resilience. And particularly, I like your book title called Ordinary Resilience. Like there's something called ordinary when we're being resilient. And I'm really interested, first of all, Luis, to talk about, first of all, what piqued your interest in this topic?
So I'm gonna give you a little bit of background about myself, so you can, picture this a little bit more. I was born in Guatemala, Central America, in a time where there was incredible, lots of political violence. So 1970s, 1980s, if you remember, we had the Cold War, but the wars were fought, and the battles were fought in Latin America. And so my country was one of those places where there was a lot of political instability. On top of that, we also, we grew up really, really poor. I mean, literally really poor. Sometimes the question wasn't, are we going to have a breakfast? I mean, what are we going to have for breakfast? Or rather, are we going to have a breakfast today? So it was hard. Came to the United States, on a scholarship. I went to school. I got a bachelor's on science, and then was recruited to do a master's, then a PhD, and then a postdoc, and became a professor. In the course of this time, I got married, I got a cat, a house, and, everything that seems to be okay. And then all of a sudden, boom, something happened. And I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And when I came back from the brain tumor, long story short, the doctor told me, you need to accept your reality. And your reality is that you probably won't be walking straight much, or be a professor for I don't know when, because I had some cognition issues. So I survived the tumor, but neither my marriage nor my professional dream survived. So I'm gonna put a pause here, and then I'm gonna take you back to Guatemala. And in Guatemala, as I said, I grew up really poor. My father was a truck driver, and he would make $25 a month. And my mom was a seamstress, and her, the daily wage was I think $1.25 a day. So it wasn't very much. He had a horrible, horrible accident. And then when he came back from the accident, he was pretty much disabled. And he said, I'm going to build my business. I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to send you to university. I'm going to do this. And my mom and I, were, laughing. How are you going to do that? You didn't do it when you were healthy. How are you going to do it now? He did it. He actually did it. It was a transformation that was incredible. He became very successful. With success comes wealth. He became very wealthy and successful. So when I was going through my whole, process and my whole thing, I remember him, and he was what I call my, inspiration. And as I started, living and reinventing myself, and when the doctor told me I couldn't walk anymore, I decided to run, and that was 100 marathons ago. So I've run over 100 marathons. I've run several ultra marathons that are some of that are 105 miles, 100-mile races. So I've done a lot of crazy things, and people will tell me, "My God, you're so strong, you're so resilient. How you do it?" And in my mind is, I haven't done anything different. I'm just living my life the way I live. It's nothing there. And so the book story started as a journaling and reflection of trying to understand myself and my dad. What is it that we did that allow us to not only bounce back, but adapt and thrive? Because my dad is thriving, so am I. And so that's how I started. At that time, I didn't have a word to describe it. I knew that my dad and I were doing something different, and we're killing. We came back roaring, and we are fantastic. Build a new life. And it wasn't until I, did my research and I started looking for, connections when the word resilience came about. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what it is. This is what we went through. This is what we can describe it. So that's what happened. So I didn't start the book purposely thinking about resilience, but resilience was a name that could explain my dad's and my experience, and now the experience of many of the leaders that I coach.
Wow, that's amazing. To be told by your doctor that you'll never walk again, and then to run, did you say 105 miles?
Yeah, so that's my longest run. So
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. I don't know if I would call that ordinary, but
oh, yeah. So going back to that, and I'm glad that you say that, it's ordinary. And the reason why I call it ordinary, because the way I see the world is we are the most resilient species in the world. We have built rockets, we have beaten COVID, we have done so many things that are incredible because we are resilient. So resilience is already in our DNA. What my dad and I have done is accessing what we already have. And that is the key, is that I think that resilience is something so ingrained in our DNA that we all have access to it. What we need to do is to access it and use it.
I love it. I love it. So I'm curious, Luis, a lot of our business owners, they have if they're in the midst of the struggle, it's hard to see a way through, right? I think a lot of people, what do they say? When you're 40% there, that's when you feel like quitting, right? And which means you still got 60% more to go. And I'm curious, where do people start with becoming more resilient in order to make it through challenging times? Like, where do you start at?
So I have a formula for resilience, and the formula for resilience is commitment plus persistence times optimism. So where do you start? Is by making a commitment to yourself and to your employees or to your business. I'm going to make this work. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That commitment, and I use the word commitment because the word commitment has an emotional attachment to it. I'm committed to my wife. I'm committed to my children. It's an emotional attachment to it. And I think that that's what we need. You see what I'm saying? So where do you start? Is to make the decision. So remember what I was telling my dad, say, I am going to do this. I am going to do this. You make the decision. I remember when I was, in the middle of my thing, when my wife had left, and I was literally considering suicide. And I was crying and I was thinking, how am I going to do that? And then an image of my mom appeared, of my mom. And I realized I cannot do this to her. If I do this, she will suffer because I killed myself. So I said, I need to get better. I'm going to get better. That's the first step, is making the commitment. So that's number one, the step number one. Step number two is persistence. Realizing that it's not going to be easy. Life is hard, but we have an option also to choose our pain and to choose our rewards. If you think about this, building a business is hard. No, building a business is hard too, because it puts you, in a scarcity mode. Going to the gym is hard, but being overweight is also hard. So the way I see it is that we have the ability to choose our pain. And when we say, that I am committed to this, and I know that it's not going to be hard, it's not going to be easy, then allow us to continue. But here is the key. Those two things by themselves are a recipe for burnout. And that is what a lot of times what entrepreneurs and business owners, it's just like a grind. I'm committed to the business, and they get up in the morning and they keep doing, and I am doing is not hard. There is another element of that, and it's the optimism, and it's the hope that things are going to get better. Thinking about my dad, he said, I am going to build a business, and I'm going to send you to the university. I'm going to buy a house. Those two things are in the future. And those two things are the things that motivated my dad to do the hard work and to stay committed. And a lot of times, to your point earlier, that people believe that we don't have a choice. And the reality is that we do. And if we look up, by the way, not doing anything is a choice.
Oh, yeah.
So once we have a choice, and once we know that we can do something about the choice, then become hopeful. A lot of people that are burned out and people that are like selling the business, they feel that they don't have a choice. And they do. We do. We just need to find it and look for it.
I love that. The fact that we have a choice. We can choose to suffer, or we can choose to do better, or as you say, choose to be overweight or choose to be fed, and deal with the consequences based upon your choice.
And suffering is going to happen. You see, and that's the point. Is that this suffering, life is hard. One way or the other, we have to go through life. And life is not easy sometimes. But we have the choice of what is the purpose of this pain? Is it regret or is it reward? The regret is I sold my business because, blah, blah, blah. Or is it reward? I made it work.
Right. I love that. Now, of course, from a business perspective, it's important to choose what you're going to be resilient to, right? Because, I think of Blockbuster, they continue to sell CDs. Netflix said we're going online. We have CDs, but we're pivoting to online streaming because that's the wave of the future. And we have to be selective about what we're going to choose to persevere through.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, what is your take on choosing when it's time to continue on or when it's time to quit?
So there are a couple of things that you mentioned here. And I think that the first thing is, like you mentioned blockbusters, companies, the products that are outdated. And I think that a lot of times, that's what happened with entrepreneurs and business owners, that they put all their hopes in a product. And I think that is not the right approach. I think that what we need to put is on the impact. So if you think about the blockbusters, like the product was video cassette. The impact was entertainment. So if you focus on the impact, then you can pivot because you're not married to the product, because the product, to your point, becomes obsolete. So the key here is making sure that what is it that you're committed to? You're committed to the product, or you're committed to the impact that you're going to have. And a lot of times that I see is people being committed to the product. This is the product, missing the opportunity that what is the impact that this, and is there another way that you can affect this impact?
Ooh, that was so good. Guys, did you hear that? It's not being committed to what you're doing necessarily in terms of product. It's the impact that you want to have in the world.
Absolutely.
So much golden nuggets there. So much golden nuggets. Oh my goodness. That is so good. That really is the key.
So going back to your original question, how do you know that it's time to, to quit, to give up. I don't think that we need to do that. I think that what we need to do is to pivot. And the pivot can have many, many different ways. So if I am an entrepreneur, my goal is to be an entrepreneur. If this business is not working, I'm going to pivot into something else. I'm not quitting this. I'm going to pivot into something else. So the word quitting, it has some negative connotations, and it does a lot for our perception of self-worth. So I don't use the word quitting. I don't quit. I pivot. And I think that is key for a lot of entrepreneurs, that they don't need to quit. They need to pivot.
I love that. That's a good thing. So we'll remove that word quit from our vocabulary. We'll use the word pivot going forward. I love it. So let's say we have entrepreneurs now that are in the thick of it, and they want to start to become resilient, and they're applying your formula now of persistent and commitment times optimism. What does that look like in terms of practical application to make it through, to see it through the storms? What does that look like?
I tell you what it looks like for me, and I think that like the commitment. So I think that we were talking about children, right? I mean that the idea of our children, you're going to camps and whatnot. And I think that the one thing that I do, and I tell people, is that we need to figure out what success look like. And success doesn't mean that it's going to be money or is going to be product sold, but there has to be other level of success metrics to that. One metric of success that I have is time that I spend with my children. So if, for instance, if I all of a sudden I cannot pick them up for camp, or I'm not doing something else, then I know that I'm working too much. You see? So I think that we need to figure out what those metrics are. So, and the idea that success is tied to units sold, clicks done. We have no control a lot of times over that. We can't. And that is the idea, is that we don't have control of everything that is happening in the market. And if things go south, then, oh my gosh, I haven't done enough. I should do more. And we are very hard on ourselves. So I think that the key here is to understand what is the metric of success. By the way, monetarily and clicks or whatever is one way, but it's not the only way. So like the way I see it, for instance, I have a purpose and I have a mission. My mission is to help people to be resilient and to drive through and to get their goals and whatnot. But my purpose, I am a father, so I want to make sure that my kids are taken care of. So anything that I do has to fulfill those two. And that makes it easy for me to realize, oh, well, there is a gig here that you need to go to New York for 3 days. No, I'm not going to do it because that will take me away from my child. So, but that doesn't mean that is not an opportunity loss, but rather it's an opportunity won, because, okay, so what else I can do in this area right here?
Oh, I love it. I love it. So it's really figuring out what those personal metrics are for success.
Absolutely. And they vary. They vary. I mean, and to tell you the truth, I was coaching, by the way, this guy was even fantastic. He's an entrepreneur. He came to the United States to go to medical schools, and he started building a business along with his roommates and a couple of professors. They built an incredible business. They sold the business to a big pharma company for $4.9 billion. And when I was coaching him, he said, what is my next step? What do I do now? What do I do? And so I said to him, what do you want? And he mentioned three things. 3 things are important for me: my religion, my profession, and my family. And I said, well, a lot of times you have to find an anchor. What is your anchor? My anchor is my family. He said, my anchor is my religion. I want to become Jewish. That's why it's here. So he started to do everything around that anchor. So I think a lot of times entrepreneurs go in thinking they have to do everything for everything. And I think that we have to have an anchor, because that grounds us to what we need to do.
I love that. I love that. We have to have an anchor. And I imagine that anchor probably changes.
Absolutely.
Over time.
And that is the other key. We need to be flexible. That's part of resilience, is we need to adapt and be flexible and pivot, and the idea that, if this doesn't work, well, how can we make it work in a different way?
I
Yeah,
love it.
when I was single, I'm a runner. I love to run, and I would just go run for literally for. I would tell my wife, do you want to have breakfast in San Francisco? And she goes, yeah. So I said, okay, I'll meet you there, and I will run from here to there. It's about 40 miles or so. So I will start like midnight, but then I realized that when my children were born, I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't do that to her. They needed me more. So I shifted, now I do other things. But the key here is that a lot of times, we need to be able to pivot and to maintain that sense of anchorness into what we do.
I love it. And so where you find obstacles where people, they're gun ho, they're excited about building resilience, they're, tackling on this formula, they're figuring out what their anchor is. Luis, where do you find that it goes wrong? Where does it go wrong with people with trying to move through something and move through resilience and be resilient? Where does it go wrong?
So I think that it's not about building resilience, but resilience is a vehicle that allows you to build something else. All right. So the way I see resilience, it has three components, three phases. One is survival. Survival, COVID, when COVID hit, everybody was trying to figure out what can I do to survive. That is typical that we do that. The next step is adaptation. How can we make it easier for us? At the beginning, everybody was trying to fight for toilet paper. That is survival. But then the adaptation is like, well, maybe I shouldn't use as much. Maybe I shower after, whatever we do. That's adaptation. And the next step is thriving. Not doing awesome despite of the issues, but because of the issues. So if you think about, there are many stories out there, the companies that completely reinvented themselves because of COVID. And I think that we can do that as well. So now, how does that look like? I think that the less time we spend in survival mode, the more resilient we are. So when we are in the middle of something, it's like, oh my gosh, now, not again. Okay, how can I adapt to this? And the minute we start thinking of adapting, then you start looking for solutions. And then the next step is thriving. So that's the thing. I think that it's about intentionality. Is going into something, but going back to something that you mentioned earlier, and I want to make sure that I don't dismiss it, is that there is a time for us to mourn. There is a time for us to feel bad about it. But the time to do that doesn't have to last 10 years or 2 years. You just get it done. And then immediately I ask myself, okay, what am I going to do about this? The minute I ask myself, what am I going to do about this? Then I start looking opportunities and seeing things from a different perspective that will allow me to adapt and then thrive.
I love it. I love it. We had such a good conversation before we started recording over in the green room. And you were given an example about business owners needing to adjust to just changes in the workforce, where your employees have different needs now than what they had in COVID. And I'd like to revisit that conversation because I think it really impacts a lot of our listeners on that. We talked about how business was done prior to COVID, and we see a lot of business leaders leaning at how do I convert it back to pre-COVID? How do I create my business the way it is? And you had a very different stance on it, Luis, and I'd love to have you share that for just a moment.
So when COVID started, I had two proposals to two companies, and one of the companies came back and said, you know what, we're going to put a hold on this until COVID ends, and then we're going to revisit it. I think that they're still waiting for COVID to end. The other company, they say, oh my God, this is what we need right now. This is what we need. Where can we get started? So it's like, oh my God, one is like, let's wait and see. And the other one is, no, let's shift the materials or let's shift the resources where we need it the most, as opposed to waiting for things to the end. So that's one thing. I'm gonna put it together after I tell you. The other thing is, I was doing a podcast recording with another friend a couple of weeks ago, and he said, how do you raise your kids? You grew up in a place where there's poverty, and now your kids are probably living in a completely different world, in a world of abundance. How do you do that? And as I was thinking my answer, I realized that my experience is different from my kids. I cannot try to replicate my experience to them because it wouldn't be fair to them, and they wouldn't even understand what I look like because that was my experience. And I think that the idea that a lot of business owners have is that let's wait until the end. That doesn't happen anymore. And two is like, well, in my time, we used to do it like this. That doesn't happen anymore. I think that what we need to do, business owners need to do, is to embrace the change that is happening and take advantage of it.
Interesting.
You see what I'm saying? So it's like the idea is like, you cannot replicate the past. What you can do is build the future.
Okay. Let's give some examples on that.
Well, think about this. Think about, the idea that I know some people right now. I met some people that I worked with them for years and I never met them before. That is the reality of things. In the past, it wouldn't happen like that. Organizations, I have a couple of organizations that are completely remote. In the past, they didn't happen before. So this organization adapted to the new reality. They never said, well, now that the COVID has passed, let's get people back into the office, which people are actually doing. But that is the wrong approach. I think that the key here then is to realize where we are, what are the pressures that we have, and what are the pressures that our employees have, and then build on that rather than try to recreate something that is longer gone.
I love that. Again, like you said, focusing on the impact, right? If the impact is to change lives and help businesses adjust and be more resilient, then it doesn't matter how we do it, in person or on Zoom.
Yeah. And, there is a quote in the book, and I wish I could take credit for that, but I don't remember who said it. It says that the world doesn't belong to the people that know the most, but to the people that learn the fastest. And that applies to entrepreneurs and to everyone too. We have to adapt to the changes and we have to dance in the rain.
I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness, such a deep conversation. Oh my goodness, this is so good. Now, Luis, this has been so helpful and such a really unique spin of how to think about things in our businesses that are rapidly changing, especially during this time. As we wind down, one of the things that I like to ask our guests is, if you could give one piece of advice, and it can be personal, it can be business related, what would that advice be?
I'm going to change the advice to a question. What can you do today? So 2 years from now, you can say that this crisis that you're having right now is the best thing that happened to your business. So in other words, it's like whatever crisis you're having right now, you have to embrace it and use it because it will not last forever. And then you can either survive it and you can push it and thrive, or you can pivot, and that's okay.
I love it. So it's turning that crisis into a gift, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. And life is ups and downs, but if you look at it's like the stock market, ups and downs. But if you see it, if you zoom away and you see the long term, you see that it's way up. And sometimes we just focus on the bottom and on ups and downs. We don't see the line that is actually a marathon. It's not just a 5K that we need to sprint it through.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, I had my 13-year-old this week call me in panic, and the stock market had taken a dip, and he had just bought some shares, and he's very new into this. And he's panicking. He's like texting us every 5 minutes about, Mom, what's going on in the stock market? And his dad and I are like, just a day, But you're right. He's 13 now, and this crisis is a big deal. But in 30 years from now, he'll be quite happy he bought it.
Absolutely. And I think, now I don't want to dismiss the pressure that, entrepreneurs have of generating money and selling this and selling that. I don't want to dismiss that. But what I don't want is to make sure that people understand that they have options, and they have options. As I said, I run very long distances, and sometimes, I picture yourself in mile 76 of a 100-mile race.
I've never ran past 2, maybe 3.
And all of a sudden you feel I can no longer go. That's it. I'm done. But then you realize that the only way to get out is to make it to the next station. So you have to pick up and go. Yeah, and I think that a lot of times we confuse uncomfortability with pain. I don't want to go to work because it's so painful. No, it's not painful. It's uncomfortable. He says, I don't want to talk to my boss, because it's painful. No, it's uncomfortable. I don't want to make that call because it's painful. They rejected me. No, it's uncomfortable. And I think that making that distinction, at least for me, has been tremendously useful. Distinguishing between what is really pain and what is uncomfortability. And the reality is that the growth happens in the uncomfortable places.
I love that. So let's get used to the uncomfortable, everyone.
Absolutely.
Because for where we're going, there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable moments. I love it. I love it. So, Luis, how does our viewers, our listeners, how do they reach you to learn more, to get in touch with you, to work with you?
I hope that you can put a link to my LinkedIn profile. I also have a website, it's velascoaching.com. And I think that those are the two things that that people can connect with me. Now, if you want to learn more about the book, you probably going to go to Amazon and search Ordinary Resilience and take a look at the great reviews. I'm so humble and happy of the reviews, the people that are writing about it, and so it's very awesome. So, and by the way, I respond to every single email. So if people email me, I respond to every single one of them.
And what I'll do is I'll put Luis's links in our show notes. So once you guys are in a safe place, you'll be able to scroll a little bit downward to click on those links for his book, as well as for his LinkedIn profile, to get in touch with them, to learn more, and to build that ordinary resilience.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Luis, for joining us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge.
I appreciate it tremendously. I'm very humble and honored.
Thank you.